Welcome back to the channel, dear viewers. If you've been following Emma's incredible journey from the muddy roadside in Surulere to the golden lights of Crownville Towers, you know this is more than just a story. It's a movement. Let's recap. Emma Davis, a humble cleaner with a heart full of grace and a past full of hardship, was mocked and splashed by fashion heiress Melissa Grant in broad daylight. But what Melissa didn't know, someone powerful was watching. Enter Ethan Cole, a reclusive billionaire who saw in Emma not a victim, but a woman of strength. Quietly, he began to change her life. A hot breakfast, a promotion, a scholarship. And somewhere in between those small, silent steps came something even deeper. Now Emma stands on the edge of a new world, one where she's not just seen, but celebrated. But as her light grows, so does the shadow of jealousy and sabotage. So what's next for Emma? Will love blossom where injustice once struck? Will Melissa finally face the consequences? Stick around because this story is just beginning. It had been a year since the morning that changed everything, since the splash of muddy water on a quiet Lagos street, and the silence that followed. Back then, Emma Davis was invisible to the world, just another girl in a frayed uniform with sore hands and silent dreams. Today, she stood taller, not just in stature, but in spirit. Her blue cleaner's uniform had been traded for a sleek hospitality trainee badge at Crestmont Tower, the city's most prestigious hotel. She still worked nights, but now in pressed slacks and polished shoes, welcomed by name instead of ignored. In a modest West Pine flat that smelled faintly of mint soap and toasted bread, Emma carefully sliced apples for Olivia's lunchbox. Her little sister, now in primary 4, twirled in her socks to an upbeat radio song, the wooden floor creaking under her steps. "Toast or apple pancakes?" Emma called, holding up both. "Toast! Pancakes! Slow me down!" Olivia giggled, brushing past her like a breeze. Emma smiled softly, tying the last ribbon on her sister's hair. The apartment was tiny, just one bedroom, a shared bathroom, and a kitchen that could barely fit 2, but it felt like safety. Like a life finally beginning to breathe. Across town, a crumpled man sat alone in a dim, peeling apartment that smelled of cigarettes and mildew. On the table, a newspaper, folded but unread. The headlines stared at him like a challenge, from mopping floors to mastering hospitality, Emma Davis's unexpected ascent. Peter Davis hadn't been around when his wife passed. He hadn't held his daughter's hand during her darkest hours. But now he saw her smiling in a paper with a man in a tailored suit. The rage clawed at his throat. "So, this is who she became without me," he muttered. Time to remind her where she came from. The city buzzed beneath a soft gray sky as Emma stepped off the hotel shuttle. The air smelled of brewing coffee and new beginnings. She moved through the Crownmont lobby like a quiet force, confident, but never loud. Colleagues greeted her with nods and small smiles. The same people who once overlooked her now respected her discipline, her precision. As she passed the flower vendor in the lobby, he handed her a single sunflower. "For the one who makes this place shine," he said with a wink. By the time Emma reached her building in West Pine, the sun had begun to slip behind Lagos's jagged skyline. She opened the rusted gate with her usual rhythm, humming lightly until she saw him. A man leaning against the fence, older, thinner, a scar slicing across one eyebrow. The years hadn't been kind to Peter Davis, but Emma recognized him instantly. Her stomach turned to ice. He stepped forward, spreading his arms as if expecting an embrace. "Emma, you look like your mother." She froze. The last time she had seen him was the night he slammed their door and didn't come back. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice low and sharp. "I came to see my girls," he said. "Thought you might want to introduce me to the man with the money." Emma's breath hitched. So that was it. Not regret, not love, just curiosity, and maybe greed. "You're too late," she replied. "Olivia doesn't know you, and I've learned how to survive without ghosts." She turned to go, but his voice chased her. "Money doesn't change blood, Emma." She didn't even look back. "No," she said, "but it reveals who was never there to begin with." The rain started just after midnight, light at first like a whisper against the windows, then heavier. more urgent, like the sky had something to say. Emma sat curled on the couch, Olivia sleeping with her head on her lap. Her phone buzzed quietly against the coffee table. Unknown number. One message. Blood doesn't fade. I'm not done. Emma stared at the screen, her heartbeat rising. She gently shifted Olivia onto a pillow and stood to lock the windows and door. Then she turned off the lights and stood in the dark, only the blinking red light of the microwave casting a faint glow in the room. She wasn't afraid, not exactly, but the past has a way of touching the future with cold fingers. And Peter Davis had always known how to make people flinch. Across the city, Vanessa Grant, now operating under her rebranded PR identity, Nessa Gray, was perched on a marble stool in her Lekki apartment. Once the queen of Lagos society, Vanessa had slipped from the spotlight after her scandal. But tonight, her inbox chimed with something interesting. A man claiming to be Emma Davis's estranged father had sent her a message. Attached, a clip from a private gossip blog draft titled, "The Truth Behind the Fairy Tale." Vanessa read it once, then again. Her eyes narrowed. "She thinks she's risen above us," she whispered. "Let's see if she knows how to survive a fall." Then she typed 2 words back to Peter Davis. "Let's meet." The diner was dim, lit mostly by a flickering sign outside and the low buzz of conversation. Peter Davis sat hunched in a corner booth, fingers stained with years of regret and cheap cigarette ash. Across from him sat Vanessa, flawless as always, in crisp white and gold, her hair slicked back like a crown of disdain. She didn't sip her tea. She studied him. "You said you had something," she said coolly, "something that would hurt her." Peter slid a yellowed envelope across the table. Inside, old family photos, hospital bills in his name but unpaid, a forged letter made to look like Emma had abandoned her dying mother. "It's not just lies," he said. "It's lies that feel true." Vanessa flipped through the contents slowly. Her smile never touched her eyes. "You really want to destroy your daughter?" she asked. "No," Peter said. "I just want her to remember who she came from." Vanessa placed the envelope into her purse and stood. "Good," she said, "because I'm not interested in ruining her life. I'm interested in cracking her image slowly, publicly, like porcelain." She adjusted her sunglasses. "And you, Mr. Davis, are the perfect hammer." She walked out before he could answer, the clink of her heels echoing through the small diner. Peter sat alone, hands shaking, but not from guilt, from anticipation. Back in West Pine, Emma sat on her balcony with a cup of tea, unaware of the conversation that had just marked her name in someone else's war plan. Olivia was inside drawing a picture of our future house, and Ethan had just texted, "Dinner Friday? I'll bring something homemade. Yes, I cook." She smiled softly, unaware that both love and danger were heading straight toward her door. By Friday morning, Emma's routine had become comfort. Walk Olivia to school, head to class, then report to Crown Vale's VIP lounge for her evening shift. But as she walked through the hotel's grand atrium that day, she felt a shift in the air, quiet, sharp, and watching. Her co-workers smiled a little too politely. Her supervisor, usually warm, seemed distant. Something was off. At her locker, she found a folded magazine tucked beneath her uniform. On the cover, "The House of Lies, Emma Davis's Rise," was built on betrayal. Beneath it, a photo of her cropped tightly, her expression unreadable. Inside the article were twisted narratives, how she manipulated Ethan Cole, how her real background included abandonment, forgery, and scandal. There was even a fabricated quote from an unnamed family source. Emma's breath caught. She looked around the room. No one would meet her eyes. Ethan arrived that evening, his promised homemade meal in hand, wearing jeans and an apron that read, "This is my romantic effort." But when he saw Emma standing stiff in the staff kitchen with the magazine in her hands, everything changed. "They went public," she said quietly. He scanned the headline, jaw tightening. "I'll sue every one of them." But Emma shook her head. "That's exactly what they want. If I fight loud, they'll call me dramatic. If I stay quiet, they'll call me guilty." He leaned closer. "Then we change the game." She looked up, eyes tired but steady. What do you mean? Ethan's gaze was fierce now. We stop reacting. We start exposing. Emma nodded slowly. She was scared, but she was done hiding. Somewhere, Peter and Vanessa were watching, thinking the cracks were spreading. What they didn't know was that Emma wasn't breaking. She was fortifying. Saturday morning arrived with the dull ache of headlines still hanging in the air. Emma didn't scroll through her phone. She didn't need to. Olivia's silence at breakfast was louder than any tabloid. The little girl picked at her toast, avoiding eye contact. "You okay?" Emma asked gently. "I don't like when people at school talk about you," Olivia whispered. "They say you tricked Mr. Ethan. That Grandpa told them." Emma's throat tightened. So Peter had taken it that far, poisoning even playground gossip. She got up, walked around the table, and knelt beside her sister. "People say things when they're afraid of the truth," she said softly. "But I promise, nothing they say can change what's real between us." Across town, Vanessa stared at her phone, reading the same headlines she had engineered. But instead of satisfaction, she felt unease. Emma hadn't retaliated. No angry posts, no emotional meltdown. Just stillness. It was unnerving. "She's either breaking," Vanessa muttered to herself, "or building something bigger." She poured herself a drink and looked out over the city. Behind her, Peter walked in with a smug grin. "Told you she'd feel it." But Vanessa didn't smile back. "Did you, though? Or did you just remind her why she had to leave everything behind?" Peter's face twisted. "She's a liar," Vanessa finally turned. "She's a survivor. There's a difference." And for the first time, Peter realized he might be the one being used. That evening, Emma stood on a dimly lit rooftop, staring at the skyline. Her phone buzzed a text from Ethan. "Meet me in the lounge. Just trust me." She went. And what she walked into wasn't another ambush. It was a stage set for her voice. Emma stepped into the Crown Vale VIP lounge and froze. The lights were dimmed, the guests were gone, and in their place were soft camera lights, a velvet armchair, and Ethan standing beside a small production crew. He smiled gently. "You said they keep telling your story wrong," he said. "So, tell it right, on your terms." Her heart thundered. "You want me to go on camera? I want you to be heard." Emma stood silent for a moment, then walked slowly to the chair. She sat, adjusted her sleeves, and looked directly into the lens. No makeup crew, no stylist. Just Emma, faded green tunic, tired eyes, and unshakable spirit. The cameraman nodded. "We're rolling." She inhaled. "My name is Emma Davis. You might know me from the headlines, but I'd like to introduce myself properly." And she told it all. The mud, the splash, the shame, the little girl waiting at home, her mother's illness, the man who never came back. The room went still as her voice threaded through grief, love, and grit. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She just told the truth like she had been waiting her whole life for someone to ask. When she finished, Ethan walked over and took her hand. "We'll post it tonight," he said, "but only if you want to." She nodded once. Later that night, the video went live with a simple caption: "Her truth, no edits." By dawn, it had over 4 million views. People weren't just listening, they were rallying. Emma's story didn't spark pity, it lit a fire. One that burned through lies, exposed manipulation, and reminded a city what real resilience looked like. And in a quiet penthouse, Vanessa watched the whole thing and whispered, "She's not just surviving. She's winning." The next morning, headlines shifted like the tide. No longer whispers behind Emma's back. The truth stood center stage. The cleaner who spoke back, Emma Davis, a voice of grace, and, not a scandal, a survivor. Social feeds flooded with support. Public figures reposted the video. Former hotel guests shared photos with Emma and stories of her kindness. At Crown Vale Towers, staff who once barely nodded now offered hugs. "You said what we've all felt," one whispered. Even the front desk manager slipped her a note. "We stand with you, proud to work beside you." Emma didn't let the attention sway her, but for once she didn't flinch from it either. Meanwhile, inside a cold visitation room at the city jail, Peter Davis watched the video over a flickering TV in the corner. The other inmates jeered. "That's your girl?" one asked with a laugh. Peter didn't answer. He watched the screen as his daughter's words cut through his pride like a blade. Every sentence reminded him of what he hadn't been, what he had abandoned. Across town, Vanessa stared blankly at her reflection in a compact mirror. For the first time, her designer lipstick felt like a costume. The press had turned. Brands started pulling back. A whisper of, "Maybe we backed the wrong side," echoed through PR circles. Her assistant entered with a hesitant tone. "Ma'am, Vogue Nigeria canceled next week's interview." Vanessa slammed the mirror shut. "Fix it," she hissed. But even she knew the story had slipped from her hands. Back at home, Olivia stood on the tiptoe to hang a paper drawing on the fridge. It showed Emma with a cape, smiling. Underneath, she had written in crayon, "My hero." Emma stared at it for a long time. Not just because it was sweet, but because it was finally true. Ethan stood at the gates of Cole Estates headquarters, camera flashes flickering as he stepped up to a waiting podium. The media had gathered without invitation, drawn by the wildfire of Emma's story and the silence from Cole Estates' board. Ethan cleared his throat, wearing a charcoal suit with no tie, his voice calm but commanding. "Today, I won't be answering questions about profit margins," he said. "Today I'm speaking about something bigger than business. Integrity." He looked directly into the crowd. "Emma Davis is not a PR risk. She is a standard, and anyone who believes otherwise is not someone I intend to work with." The crowd erupted. Somewhere in the background, a board member quietly walked away, phone already to ear resignation forming mid-call. Inside a small cafe across town, Emma watched it all unfold on a borrowed phone. The barista who used to dismiss her now gave her free tea without asking. "You've changed the air around here," he said quietly. She didn't know how to reply. She still felt like the same Emma just finally seen in the light. At that moment, her phone buzzed. "Oh, an email from the National Hospitality Association. Congratulations, you've been selected to speak at our global forum in Paris." Her breath caught. She turned the screen so Olivia could read it. The little girl squealed. "Paris? Like with croissants?" Emma laughed through a tear. "Exactly like that." Meanwhile, Vanessa sat alone in her penthouse. Emails unread, invitations withdrawn, her brand slipping through her fingers. She scrolled Emma's video again, this time with different eyes. There was no act in Emma's voice, no performance, just power. And for the first time, Vanessa whispered something not born of jealousy or vengeance. She earned it. Back at home, Emma closed her laptop, packed Olivia's homework, and stood quietly at the window. The city below didn't look so far away anymore. It looked possible. Paris was colder than Emma expected, but not unfriendly. The conference hall shimmered with soft gold lighting, and banners in multiple languages lined the walls. Emma stood backstage, dressed in a sleek navy dress, her natural hair in a soft twist bun. Olivia sat in the front row beside Ethan, who wore the same calm pride he always had when looking at her, not as a billionaire, but as someone who believed in her when no one else did. Her name was called. She walked onto the stage, heart steady. The applause was respectful, curious, welcoming. She stepped up to the podium and looked out not just at hospitality leaders and executives, but at a world that once splashed her with mud and dared her to rise. "I used to think silence was safety," she began, voice clear. "That if I just worked hard and kept my head down, life would protect me. But silence lets others decide your worth, and no one should get to define your value but you." She paused. Ethan nodded subtly from the audience. "I was once the girl scrubbing marble floors while people whispered, but I wasn't ashamed of that work. I was ashamed of how the world treated those who did it. Now I scrubbed my own path and I wear it proudly." Another pause. "I am not the mud I came from. I'm the bloom that grew through it." The standing ovation that followed didn't feel like noise. It felt like closure. That evening, on a quiet Paris street, Olivia twirled beneath the lights as Emma watched, arms wrapped in Ethan's coat. He joined her, offering a warm pastry from a paper bag. "Think you'll miss scrubbing ballrooms?" he teased. Emma smiled. "I'll never stop scrubbing," she replied. "But now I get to choose the floors and who stands beside me." Me. And with that, the girl who was once invisible became unforgettable. The end. Do you believe her father and Vanessa got what they deserved? And did Emma make the right choice by choosing peace over revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on this unforgettable story. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful cinematic stories just like this one. Your support keeps these voices alive. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next twist in Emma's inspiring rise.